When to say no, the growth opportunities that will actually hurt your business. You know what's funny? Most small business owners think their biggest problem is finding growth opportunities. But here's what I've learned after decades in risk management and running my own ventures. The real problem is knowing which opportunities to turn down. I'm Scott Lindsay, and look, I've been on both sides of this. I've worked as a chief risk officer, a chief compliance officer, run internal audit departments, and as a CFO of a publicly traded bank. But more importantly, I built an internet solutions company from nothing that eventually served over 85 financial institutions and hundreds of thousands of customers across multiple jurisdictions. So I've lived both the corporate governance side and the entrepreneur side, where you're scrambling to make payroll. And here's the thing, nobody tells you when you're starting out. Sometimes the opportunities that look the most exciting are the ones that'll absolutely wreck your business. Before we dive into this, if you're finding value in this conversation, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to Small Business Risk. And drop a comment below telling me about a time you said yes to something you probably should have said no to. I read every single one, and honestly, your stories help shape what we talk about next. The seduction of growth. So let's talk about why this matters. Every business owner I've ever worked with, and I mean every single one, has faced this moment. You're humming along, maybe you've got some decent revenue, things are working, and then someone approaches you with what looks like an amazing opportunity. Could be a huge client, could be a new product line, could be an acquisition opportunity, or maybe someone wants to partner with you on something that sounds incredible. Your brain immediately goes to the upside, right? The revenue projection, the market expansion, the bragging rights. I get it. I've been there. But here's what most people miss, and this is where process discipline becomes absolutely critical. Every opportunity has a cost structure that goes way beyond the obvious numbers. And if you don't have the processes in place to evaluate that cost structure properly, you're basically flying blind. The real cost of saying yes. Let me give you a use case that I see all the time. A service business is doing maybe $500,000 in revenue, running lean, things are profitable. Then they land a client that wants to pay them $200K annually. That's 40% revenue growth right there. Looks amazing on paper. But nobody stops to map out what it actually takes to deliver that work. When you dig into it, and this is where documentation becomes your best friend, you realize this client needs deliverables every 2 weeks, requires 3 different types of reporting that you don't currently produce, wants bi-weekly check-in calls with your founder, and has compliance requirements that mean you need to completely revamp your data handling processes. You know what I mean? Suddenly that $200K client requires you to hire 2 people, invest in new systems, and your founder, who was supposed to be working on the business, is now spending 15 hours a week just managing this one relationship. The actual margin on that client? Negative. You're literally paying for the privilege of serving them. The discipline of documentation. Here's where process documentation becomes everything. And I'm not talking about creating some massive ISO certification binder that nobody reads. I'm talking about having clear written processes that let you actually evaluate opportunities in real time. In my internet solutions company, we had what I called our capability matrix. Sounds fancy, but it was really just a structured way of asking, what can we currently deliver with our existing team, systems, and processes? What's our actual capacity? Where are we already stretched thin? You document your current state, and I mean really document it, not just keep it in your head. So when an opportunity comes along, you can quickly assess the delta. What's the gap between what we do now and what this would require? Most small businesses operate on institutional knowledge that lives entirely in the founder's head. That's a massive risk, by the way, but it also means you can't objectively evaluate whether you can handle new commitments. The infrastructure question. There's this thing I used to see constantly in banking. We'd call it infrastructure debt. Companies would grow their revenue but underinvest in the systems, processes, and people that actually support that revenue. Then one day, everything collapses because the foundation can't hold the weight. Small businesses do this all the time with growth opportunities. They say yes to things that require infrastructure they don't have, assuming they'll figure it out later. Use case. I've seen a software company land a major enterprise client who required SOC 2 compliance. Sounds great, right? Enterprise client, great logo, solid revenue. But achieving SOC 2 when you've never had formal security protocols, documented change management processes, or proper access controls, that's 6 to 12 months of work and often 100K plus in consulting and implementation costs. If you don't have the discipline to document your current security posture before taking that meeting, you're going to overpromise based on optimism rather than reality. The distraction tax. But here's something more subtle that'll kill you. The distraction tax. Every new initiative, every new client that doesn't fit your core model, every strategic opportunity that requires you to build something custom, it's pulling focus from what actually makes you money. I learned this the hard way. When we were scaling the Internet Solutions Company, we got approached about building a specialized module for government agencies. Good money, interesting problem, seemed like a smart adjacency to our core business. 3 months in, we realized we'd essentially created a second company inside our company. Different compliance requirements, different sales cycle, different support model. Our best engineers were spending half their time on something that served 5% of our revenue. The opportunity cost was brutal. While we were distracted building that, 2 competitors launched features our core clients were asking for. We were late to market on our own product roadmap because we'd said yes to something that looked good in isolation but fractured our focus. Lesson: the framework for saying no. All right, so how do you actually make these decisions? Because saying no is hard, especially when revenue's involved. This is where process discipline isn't just helpful, it's essential. You need a framework, documented and actually used, not just something you think about occasionally. The 3 filters. First filter, capability alignment. This requires brutal honesty about what you actually do well, not what you think you could do or what you want to be known for. What does your current team, with current systems, actually execute consistently? Document your core competencies. I'm serious about this. Write them down. What are the 3 to 5 things your business genuinely does better than alternatives? Every opportunity that comes along gets measured against those. If it's not a clear yes on capability alignment, it needs to go through much heavier scrutiny. Second filter, resource requirements. And this is where most businesses fall apart because they don't have clear visibility into their actual capacity. You need to know, and I mean really know, with documentation, what your team's current utilization looks like. How many client hours are committed? What's your project pipeline? Where are the bottlenecks? In banking, we had capacity planning built into every department. Small businesses think that's overkill, but you know what? It's not. You don't need enterprise software, but you absolutely need some systematic way of understanding whether you can actually deliver on a new commitment without breaking something that's already working. Third filter, strategic fit. Does this move you toward where you want to be in 3 years, or is it just opportunistic revenue? This is the hardest one because revenue feels good in the moment. But I've watched businesses completely lose their identity chasing opportunities that looked good financially, but pulled them away from their actual strategic vision. The power of the written no. Here's something I started doing that changed everything. We created a opportunities declined log. Every time we said no to something significant, we documented why. What was the opportunity? Why did it look attractive? Why did we ultimately pass? What were the criteria it failed? You know what that did? 2 things. First, it protected us from second-guessing ourselves. When you're saying no to revenue, there's always that voice in your head 3 months later going, man, maybe we should have taken that. Having the documented rationale helps you stay disciplined. Second, patterns emerge. We started seeing that we were saying no to the same types of opportunities repeatedly. That's valuable information. Either it's confirming your strategy is working, or it's telling you there's a market opportunity you're consistently leaving on the table and maybe you need to build toward it intentionally. The discipline of process. Look, here's the thing about process discipline. It's not about bureaucracy. It's about creating systems that let you make good decisions quickly and consistently. When I was in banking, we had decision frameworks for everything. Sounds corporate and stiff, right? But it actually created freedom. When something came across my desk, I didn't have to reinvent the evaluation process every time. We had clear criteria, documented procedures, escalation paths. Small businesses need this too, not the corporate complexity, but the underlying discipline. Use case. A consulting firm I worked with was constantly struggling with scope creep. Clients would ask for just one more thing, and they'd say yes, because, customer service. But they had no process for evaluating change requests against capacity and profitability. We implemented a simple documented process. Any scope change request gets evaluated against 3 questions. First, does it align with the original project objectives? Second, what's the time and resource impact? Third, what's the appropriate pricing for that impact? Suddenly, they could have clear conversations with clients. We can absolutely do that, and based on our process, here's what it would require and what it would cost. Or, that's interesting, but it's outside the scope of what we're best positioned to deliver. Let me refer you to someone who specializes in that. Process gave them permission to say no professionally. The board perspective. When I was working with boards, and I've sat in front of a lot of boards in my career, one of my jobs was to be the voice of operational reality. The business development team would come in with these exciting growth proposals, and I'd be the person asking uncomfortable questions. Not because I was against growth, but because growth without operational capacity is just chaos that eventually implodes. I'd ask, do we have the risk management processes to handle this? What's the compliance burden? What happens to our existing client service levels if we take this on? What's the failure mode if this goes wrong? Small business owners need to ask themselves these same questions. You need to be both the optimistic entrepreneur and the skeptical risk officer. Here's a mental framework that helps. Before saying yes to any major opportunity, write a 1-page memo to yourself from the perspective of your future CFO or COO. What would they want you to consider? What processes would they want in place before you commit? If you can't articulate clear answers to those questions, you're not ready to say yes. This is important stuff, and if you're still with me, I appreciate it. Do me a favor. If this perspective is helpful, drop a comment below telling me what growth opportunity you're currently wrestling with. Should you say yes or no? Let's talk through it. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of small business owners who take risk management seriously, and I want you to be part of it. Deeper nuance, the exceptions. Now look, I'm not saying never take risks or never say yes to something outside your comfort zone. That's not what this is about. Sometimes you should say yes to something that stretches you. Sometimes the right move is taking on a client or opportunity that forces you to level up your infrastructure. The difference is doing it intentionally versus reactively. If you're going to say yes to something that requires building new capabilities, you need to do it with eyes wide open. Document the gaps, build the implementation plan, understand the investment required, create the timeline, get the commitments from your team. Make it a strategic initiative, not a scramble. Use case. A manufacturing business I consulted with got approached about producing a product line that would require ISO certification. Massive undertaking. 6 months of process documentation, equipment upgrades, staff training. But they didn't just say yes because the revenue looked good. They did a full analysis. They determined that ISO certification would actually benefit their entire operation, not just serve this one client. It would improve quality control across the board, reduce defects, open up other market opportunities. So they said yes, but they did it as a strategic investment in infrastructure with that client commitment as the catalyst, not the sole justification. See the difference? They controlled the process rather than letting the opportunity control them. Here's something nobody talks about enough: the emotional toll of saying yes to wrong fit opportunities. When you take on clients or projects that don't align with your strengths, it's not just operationally challenging, it's demoralizing for your team. Your people signed up to do what you're good at. When you start accepting work that's outside that zone, they're now struggling to deliver things they're not equipped for. Quality suffers, stress increases. Your best people start wondering if this is still the right place for them. I've seen this pattern repeatedly. A business says yes to something lucrative but misaligned, and 6 months later, their culture is fractured because everyone's frustrated trying to deliver something they're not naturally good at. Process discipline protects your culture as much as it protects your operations. You know what's interesting? The businesses that grow sustainably are the ones that get really, really good at saying no. They're not saying no because they're risk averse or lack ambition. They're saying no because they understand that focus is a competitive advantage. When you say no to distractions, you're saying yes to excellence in your core business. You're investing in making your primary offering so good that it compounds over time. That's where process documentation becomes a growth engine. When you've documented how to deliver your core service excellently, you can scale it, you can train new people, you can systematize it, you can improve it incrementally. But when you're constantly chasing shiny opportunities that don't fit, you never get deep enough on anything to build true competitive advantage. The founder's dilemma. As a founder, you've got this natural bias toward action. Someone brings you an opportunity, and your instinct is to figure out how to make it work. That's entrepreneurial spirit, and it's valuable. But mature businesses that last, learn to filter opportunities through documented processes before engaging that entrepreneurial optimism. It's not about killing creativity, it's about channeling it strategically. I tell founders, your job isn't to say yes to everything. Your job is to say yes to the right things and execute them brilliantly. The documented processes aren't constraints. They're tools that help you identify what right looks like for your specific business. Making this practical. All right, so what do you actually do with this? Because theory's great, but you've got decisions to make. Start here. This week, document 3 things. First, write down your current core capabilities. What does your business genuinely do well right now with current resources? Be specific, not what you hope to do or what your website says, what you actually deliver consistently. Second, document your current capacity. How many client hours are committed? What's your team's bandwidth? Where are you already stretched? Even if it's rough numbers, get it on paper. Third, if you've got an opportunity in front of you right now, write the one-page memo to yourself from your future COO's perspective. What would they want you to consider? What processes would they want in place? What's the real cost beyond the obvious numbers? These 3 documents, and they don't need to be fancy, seriously, a Google Doc works fine, will completely change how you evaluate opportunities going forward. The bigger picture. Look, small business risk isn't just a YouTube channel, it's a perspective. It's about running your business with the same operational discipline that major organizations use, but adapted for the reality of small business constraints. You don't need luck. You need knowledge. You need process. You need the discipline to say no to things that look good, but don't serve your actual business. Every episode we do on this channel is about giving you frameworks and tools to make better decisions. Some of it comes from my banking and risk management background. Some comes from building and scaling my own company. All of it is designed to help you grow sustainably without blowing up your operations in the process. The real work. The hardest part about saying no isn't the evaluation framework. It's the discipline to actually use it when there's revenue on the line and you're feeling the pressure to grow. That's where documented processes save you. When it's written down, your capabilities, your capacity, your decision criteria, you can point to it. You can tell someone, based on our operational assessment, this isn't a fit right now. It's not personal, it's professional. And here's what's wild. Clients and partners actually respect that more than they respect desperation. When you say no clearly and professionally, with documented reasoning, it signals that you're serious about what you do and you're selective about how you grow. That's attractive to the right kind of clients. I started this talking about how most small business owners think their biggest problem is finding opportunities. But the businesses that actually make it, the ones that grow sustainably, build value, and eventually exit successfully, figured out early that the skill isn't finding opportunities. The skill is knowing which opportunities to chase and which ones to let walk away. Process discipline gives you that skill. Documentation gives you the tools to apply it consistently. And the courage to actually say no when something doesn't fit. That's what separates businesses that thrive from businesses that just survive. Thanks for watching Small Business Risk. If this resonated with you, share it with another business owner who needs to hear it. And remember, you don't need luck. You need knowledge, process, and the discipline to use both. I'm Scott Lindsay, and I'll see you in the next one.